In our Thursday night soup and studies, as we've been working through a commentary on the book of Mark, a comment has been made, maybe every week, I'm not sure, but at least more than once, that there's something really comforting about how wrong the disciples get it all the time. That, we're not doing so bad, because even the disciples who had Jesus, right there in their faces, didn't always get it right. And I, for one, do find it very comforting that the men and women who Jesus specifically chose still, were people just like us. And often in the Bible, the biblical narrative, we tend to sort of gloss over those imperfections and hold these people up as perfect, shining examples of, perfect obedience or perfect faith or perfect anything, which they just aren't, because they're just people. And today we hear it again. This time in our first lesson, our story about the Israelites, God's chosen people, the people God has rescued from slavery in Egypt, are just grumpy, which is just so human. They're wandering through the wilderness. They're almost done wandering through the wilderness, and yet they're just complaining. And their complaints, don't even make that much sense. We have no food, and we don't like this food. Like, they're just miserable. And again, I find this kind of comforting. That these people who presumably had a more sort of tangible experience of God's presence than we often feel that we do. They had like a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire, and the sea parted, and all of these amazing things have happened in their lives, and still they get really grumpy, and more than grumpy, they just start complaining about God and all these horrible things that God has put them through. So it was an unpleasant time for them, but I find comfort in that story, knowing that just as often in our lives we fall short of the perfect disciple or the perfect Christian or the perfect anything, so did all of our ancestors in the faith. And I think in terms of this story of the Israelites and their wandering through the desert, they get to a point where they're just so tired of doing it that they say, maybe we should just go back to Egypt. Yeah, it was slavery, but at least we knew what to expect. When we follow God and when we start on this journey towards whatever it is God has called us to do in our lives, things are going to change. And we have to trust that where God is leading us will be better than where we started, but there's always something between those 2 points, right? And that journey, that transformation, whatever it looks like, is inevitably going to involve some struggle and some suffering. We see that in every story in the Bible where God leads God's people somewhere. It's not always an easy road to get there. And so, of course, it's tempting to just go back to the way things were. The Israelites want to go back to being enslaved by Pharaoh. That's pretty extreme, But in our lives too, I think often when we feel called to do something new, or when we know that we should, and we want to change the way we're doing things, recognizing that change is going to take effort and time and disruption of what we're used to doing can make us cling all the more tightly to whatever it is that we're familiar with, even if we know that that thing that we're familiar with is just not working anymore, or even worse, is causing us trouble. So we have, all of us, just like the Israelites, this desire, this tendency to sort of close our eyes to the troubles that are surrounding us and just remain in what is familiar, even though it may be a broken situation. But if we go on that way forever, it will kill us. If the Israelites continued in their complaining and in their desire to move backwards instead of forwards, I mean, God sent a very real, very visceral experience of how that kind of an attitude can kill you. God sent poisonous snakes that literally were killing people. So we have to move forward. We have to keep going towards where God is calling us to go. And we have to do so with our eyes opened to the reasons why we can't just stay where we are. We need to acknowledge the things that are killing us. If we do not look at those things or acknowledge them or face up to them, we will never get better. Treatment for an illness is always preceded by a diagnosis, right? And forgiveness in our worship service, liturgy, and really in our lives as followers of Jesus, forgiveness is always preceded by confession. We cannot be restored if we do not know or see what it is that is causing us the harm. So for our ancestors in the faith, the Israelites, the snakes that were killing them became the thing that they had to face. So God told Moses to make a snake out of bronze and put it on a pole and hold it up, and anyone who looked at that thing would be cured. In the same way, in our gospel lesson, Jesus compares himself to that snake and says that he too must be lifted up. But then, what is it that we are looking at when we look at the cross? What is it that is killing us that we need to face in that moment? Even that moment of crucifixion can be understood as another way in which we humans try to maintain the status quo. Crucifixion in the Roman Empire was used for political dissidents or other people who were trying to upset the way things were and the peace, so-called, of the Roman Empire. So the cross itself, perhaps, is the thing that is killing us. The use of it in that way, the use of tools of violence to keep people from upsetting the way things have always been. We stick Jesus up on this cross to keep him from changing things. And we thought that we could stay where we were, broken though it was, and destroy Jesus. But what happened instead, of course, was that in lifting Jesus up on that cross, we're forced to face all those things that are killing us. Our brokenness, our sinful humanity, our desire to maintain some sort of status quo that doesn't really work for us and certainly doesn't follow God's call. And even that attempt on our part is used by God to keep things, our attempt to keep things the way they are, is used by God and turned into a moment of healing, a source of forgiveness and restoration, and a way into a new life in Christ. as we get closer to Holy Week and closer to that moment in our liturgical year when we remember Christ being lifted up on the cross. We are called to look at that and be reminded of what put Jesus there. But not stay there. The Israelites didn't keep looking at the snake after it had healed them. We shouldn't make an idol out of the things that are killing us. But we need to face them and recognize that we need to move forward from them. And just as Jesus did not stay on that cross, we too need to move forward into the new life that we're offered on Easter and through baptism. Our journey will not be easy. It never is. We've got a lot of company in our reluctance and in our moments of suffering. But when God calls us forward, God gives us a promise that where we are headed is worth getting to. And where we are going, Christ has already been. And that should give us the faith and the strength that we need to be able to open our eyes to the way things are, to acknowledge our brokenness, and to move forward from here into the new life that God promises us. Amen.